When I first saw the job listing, it didn't seem real. Night manager needed for remote hotel. Room and board included. Must be discreet and calm under pressure. There was no address, just a phone number and a signature that looked handwritten. M. Vale, proprietor. I was broke, tired, and desperate to disappear for a while. So I called. The voice that answered sounded old-fashioned, polite, and distant, as if speaking from a long hallway. "You've managed hospitality before?" she asked. I said yes, though the last place I worked had closed 2 years ago. "Good. Our guests appreciate consistency," she said. "One more question. Do you scare easily?" I laughed, but she didn't. 2 days later, a black car arrived at my apartment. The driver never spoke. We drove for hours through winding roads that climbed higher and higher into the mountains. The air grew colder and thinner, and the forest thickened into a wall of dark pines that swallowed the sunlight. My phone lost signal before the first hour was over. When we finally stopped, I realized we hadn't passed another building for miles. The headlights cut through the mist, revealing an enormous structure half hidden behind trees. The hotel stood on a cliff edge, its walls of black stone glistening with moisture. Dozens of windows lined the facade, but none showed light. The sign above the gates read the Nocturne Hotel in weathered silver letters. As I stepped out, I felt the ground hum beneath my boots, faint, like a pulse under the earth. The driver unloaded my suitcase, tipped his hat, and left without a word. I turned to look back at the road, but it was gone. Only fog. The main doors opened before I touched them. Warm light spilled out, carrying a scent of candle wax and something metallic, almost like blood. A woman stood in the lobby, tall and elegant, her hair pinned back with an old silver comb. "You must be the new manager," she said. "I am Madame Vale." The lobby looked like something out of another century. Tall ceilings, dark wood panels, a chandelier dripping with wax, and a fireplace that burned with blue flame. Portraits hung along the walls, but all their faces were faded out, as if time had erased the features intentionally. "You'll find the hotel quiet," she continued. "We cater to a particular clientele. You'll meet them in time. But first, the rules." She handed me a small crimson book, bound in leather that felt warm to the touch. Gold lettering across the cover read the Nocturne Code. Inside, the rules were written in neat cursive. Rule 1. Do not open any room without hearing 3 knocks. Rule 2. If you hear your name whispered in the halls, ignore it. Rule 3. Never enter the dining hall after 3 o'clock in the morning. Rule 4. Do not accept tips. Rule 5. Keep the mirrors covered at dawn. Rule 6. Never call the guests by their true names. I looked up, confused. Are these jokes? Madame Vale smiled politely, but her eyes didn't. You'll understand soon enough. The rules keep everyone comfortable, including you. She gestured toward the grand staircase. Your quarters are on the 3rd floor. Please remain inside your room until sunrise tonight. Some of our guests prefer to arrive privately. As I climbed the steps, the chandelier light flickered. I turned once to glance back at her. She was still standing at the front desk, completely still, like a statue. My room was large, too large, with heavy curtains drawn across tall windows. The bed smelled faintly of lavender and old dust. I unpacked, tried the phone dead, and lay down, staring at the ceiling's ornate carvings. At some point, I must have drifted off, because I woke to a soft sound. 3 slow knocks. They came from the hallway, right outside my door. I waited, holding my breath. Then I heard my name, whispered once, close to the keyhole. By the 3rd night, the fog outside the hotel hadn't lifted once. It wrapped around the windows like old fabric, thick enough to muffle even the wind. I hadn't seen Madame Vale since the first evening. She left notes instead, written in perfect calligraphy, and always slipped under my door before dusk. The last one said, "Our first guests arrive tonight. Be polite but brief. Remember the rules." The front desk bell rang just after midnight. I hadn't heard anyone come in. The doors made no sound, but there they were. 3 figures, dripping wet as if they'd walked straight out of the mist. The first was a man in an immaculate black coat, tall and thin, his skin too pale to belong to anyone living. He didn't speak at first, only glanced at me with eyes that shimmered faintly red in the candlelight. "A room," he said finally, his voice calm but hollow, as if echoing from somewhere else. I handed him a key, trying not to stare at the faint trail of red that followed each of his steps. When I looked again, the carpet was clean. The second guest was a woman wearing a long veil that brushed the floor. She never looked up, not even when she signed the ledger. Her handwriting was impossible, looping symbols that looked older than language. The air grew colder around her, and when she moved past me, the flame in the chandelier flickered blue. The third arrived later, just before 2 in the morning. A man who smiled too wide and smelled faintly of iron. He leaned over the counter and whispered, "You look familiar." His breath fogged the polished surface, leaving a faint handprint that didn't belong to him. That night I couldn't sleep. The corridors seemed longer than before, like the hotel had stretched while I wasn't looking. I could hear footsteps above me, heavy, uneven, as if someone was walking on the ceiling. When I went to check the hall lights, I noticed something strange. The portraits that had been blank before now had faint shapes inside them, outlines of faces beginning to return. One looked almost like mine. The next evening, Madame Vale appeared again, standing silently behind the front desk, as if she'd been there all along. "Our guests are content," she said. "That means you are doing well. But be careful. The hotel remembers." "The hotel remembers what?" I asked. She smiled, showing teeth too sharp to be human. "It remembers everyone who breaks the rules." Before I could ask more, she turned away, her reflection in the lobby mirror staying a heartbeat longer than her body. Later that week, a delivery arrived, though I'd never seen anyone approach the road. 2 crates marked with crimson wax seals, both labeled provisions. Inside, there were bottles of deep red liquid, thick and cold, with no scent I could name. Madame Vale told me never to open them. "They're not for you," she said. That same night, I found a new note slipped under my door. Rule 7. If a guest offers you wine, refuse. It isn't wine. By now I'd memorized them all, though new rules kept appearing like warnings from a voice I couldn't see. Rule 1. Do not open any room without hearing 3 knocks. Rule 2. If you hear your name whispered in the halls, ignore it. Rule 3. Never enter the dining hall after 3 o'clock in the morning. Rule 4. Do not accept tips. Rule 5. Keep the mirrors covered at dawn. Rule 6. Never call the guests by their true names. Rule 7. If a guest offers you wine, refuse. The last thing I remember that night was standing in the empty lobby, watching the chandelier sway, even though the air was still. Somewhere deep inside the hotel, something was humming, low and rhythmic, like the heartbeat of a creature asleep in the walls. And when I passed by one of the mirrors that hadn't been covered yet, I swear I saw someone standing behind me. The fog outside had turned thicker than ever. It no longer drifted. It pressed against the windows like something trying to get in. By now, I'd memorized every hallway, every creak in the floorboards, every shadow that didn't belong. Or at least, I thought I had. On my 7th night, I woke to the faint sound of footsteps in the corridor. Not heavy ones. These were soft, bare, deliberate. I checked the time. 3:15. Too close to one of the rules. Then came a knock. 3 slow taps. I froze. That was supposed to be my signal before opening a door. So who was using it on me? The knocking continued, steady and calm, then stopped. A paper slipped under the door. No sound of retreating steps, no whisper, nothing. I waited 5 minutes before touching it. The note was old. The paper yellowed, the ink faded, and the handwriting, it wasn't Madame Vale's. It read Rule 8. Do not trust the ones who still breathe. I stared at it for a long time. The edges were damp, and the letters seemed to shimmer faintly, as if freshly written. I tucked it under the book of rules on my desk and tried to tell myself it was a prank. But the next morning, when I opened the book again, the note was gone, and Rule 8 had appeared inside the pages in the same ghostly handwriting. That was when I realized I wasn't the first to hold this book. The days became harder to count. The clocks in the lobby no longer agreed on the hour. Sometimes I'd hear the bell ring, go to the front desk, and find the guests already waiting, silent, patient, watching me. They didn't blink. They didn't breathe. Yet the air around them always moved, as if exhaling. I tried to leave once. I thought if I could just reach the gate, maybe the road would still be there. But the mist swallowed the path. The moment I stepped outside, the air grew thin, wrong, and every instinct screamed to turn back. The hotel didn't want me to leave. That evening, Madame Vale appeared again. She looked different, her eyes darker, her skin more colorless than before. "You've been reading too much," she said softly. "The rules exist to keep you safe, not to satisfy curiosity." "Who writes them?" I asked. Her expression didn't change. "The hotel," she said simply. "It remembers every mistake." I wanted to ask more, but she was already gone. Her shadow lingered on the wall a second too long before fading. Later that night, while checking the guest ledgers, I noticed something that shouldn't have been possible. My own name was written on the first page. Not once, dozens of times. Each entry dated years apart, some decades. Next to each version of my name was the same room number, manager's quarters, floor 3. My hand began to shake. I flipped to the last page. There, written in a dark substance that had soaked through the paper, was a new entry I hadn't written. Rule 9. If you find your name in the book, your stay has already ended. The room lights flickered. I looked toward the mirror near the bed. It was uncovered. I'd forgotten to follow Rule 5. Someone was standing behind me. Not a reflection. Not exactly. It was me. Or rather, what was left of me. The face was the same, but the eyes were empty, black like dried ink, and the skin pale enough to show veins like cracks in marble. It moved its head slowly, tilting it in silent imitation. When it smiled, I felt a sharp pain in my chest, as if something was being pulled loose. Then I blinked, and it was gone. The mirror was clean again. I found another note under my door an hour later. The handwriting was shaky, desperate, familiar. It read, "Don't ring the bell, no matter what they tell you." The night it happened, the fog outside turned red, not with light, with reflection. It was as if something beneath the mountains had opened its eyes, and the mist was only the breath leaking through its lashes. The guests gathered early. I didn't summon them. They just appeared, one by one, in the lobby, silent as statues. Madame Vale stood at the center, her face calm, her hands folded like she was about to give a sermon. "The balance has shifted," she said. "You broke Rule 5. The mirror saw you." Before I could answer, the chandelier above us trembled. The candles bent as if pushed by invisible hands, wax dripping upward instead of down. The portraits on the walls began to rot in fast motion, faces melting into skulls, skulls into black stains. The noble guest stepped forward first. Lord Morovic. His skin was no longer pale. It was translucent, veins crawling like worms under glass. His eyes burned deep crimson, and when he spoke, his voice had two tones, one human, one hollow. "The hunger returns. You can feel it too. Can't you, manager?" Behind him, the veiled woman lifted her head for the first time. The veil dissolved into smoke, revealing a face of impossible symmetry on one side and decay on the other. One eye bright as a pearl, the other a black pit. Her mouth opened wider than it should, and a whisper escaped. "Your pulse is loud." The ground rumbled. From the northern corridor came low growls, the Lyciths. They were no longer the polite family I'd greeted at check-in. Their bodies had stretched grotesquely, formatted with blood, bones rearranged beneath the skin like knives trying to escape. Their jaws split open, and they howled so loudly the glass shattered. One of them walked upright, wearing the remains of a suit torn across his chest, his eyes flicking between human grief and beast rage. The smell of iron flooded the air. Then came guest 313, the smiling man. Only now his face was a vertical slit, running from forehead to throat, opening like a curtain. Rows of teeth spiraled inward, grinding softly as he spoke with my voice. "You look tired. I can take your shift." When he grinned, I could see my own tongue twitching deep inside him. The hall lights went out. The blue fire in the fireplace turned black. And then I realized the hotel itself was breathing. The floor pulsed beneath my feet, each tile rising and falling like lungs. The walls began to change texture, with turning to something softer, wet, pinkish, like living tissue. The grand staircase twisted, folding into itself. The banister became a spine. I ran for the front door, but the handle was gone. The wood had sealed over it like scar tissue. Madame Vale turned to me then. She wasn't human anymore, not even close. Her dress moved like smoke. Her hair a crown of black tendrils that fluttered as if underwater. Her eyes were gone, replaced by 2 rings of candlelight. When she spoke, it wasn't words. It was the sound of heartbeats overlapping. The book of rules flew open in my hands, pages tearing themselves free. Words rearranged midair, letters bleeding into new sentences. A final message appeared across the last blank page. Rule 10. If the guests grow restless, ring the silver bell and feed them the manager. I looked toward the desk. The bell was there, shining faintly in the dark. The guests turned as one, every eye inhuman, glowing with hunger. The shadow maid crawled from the ceiling above me, her wax-dripping fingers trailing black liquid that hissed when it touched the floor. Her face was featureless, but dozens of mouths whispered beneath her skin. Ring it, ring it, ring it. And from the back hall came others I'd never seen, new creatures, the long-forgotten patrons of the nocturne. Demons with twisted antlers made of bone, eyes carved into their chests. A man with the head of a stag and hands like bird claws. A shape made entirely of candles that burned with screaming faces. A nun whose shadow walked separately, dragging chains across the carpet. A thing of smoke and veins, crawling on all fours, its ribs glowing from within like lanterns. They were all here, the old guests, the first ones, the founders of the rules. Madame Vale raised her hand, elegant and calm. It must be done, she said. The feast sustains the walls. You manage their hunger, but once in a century, the hotel must feed. Her hand extended toward the bell. I thought of running, of breaking the windows, of screaming for help, but there was no outside left, only fog and the faint, endless heartbeat beneath the floor. So I did the only thing I could. I reached for the bell. The instant I touched it, a sound like thunder burst through the building. The guests screamed, not in fear, but in ecstasy. Their bodies began to collapse inward, folding into the walls, into the ceiling, into the floor, feeding the flesh of the nocturne. I felt it pulling at me too. My vision blurred. My heartbeat slowed, syncing with the rhythm of the building. I saw my reflection again in the broken glass. My eyes were turning silver, my veins black. Madame Vale leaned close, her voice soft against my ear. You've done well. The hotel will remember you. I smiled, I don't know why. Maybe it wasn't even me smiling anymore. The next thing I remember is waking up behind the front desk. The hotel was clean again. The walls were stone. The portraits were blank. A car stopped outside. A new man stepped out, suitcase in hand, looking up at the sign. I straightened my tie and opened the door for him. Welcome to the Nocturne Hotel, I said. Please take this, it's our rule book. Read it carefully before dawn. He smiled, nervous and tired. Are there many rules? I nodded. There are 10, I said, and they must never be broken.